In my last video, I made this plaster mold, which is a two-part mold for this vessel here that I pulled out of this mold. The idea is that we have a bottom mold that is split basically at the widest point of the vessel, and we have an upper mold. These get stacked together, we pour in slip, and we let the pot firm up. We then can demold it and pull out our slip cast piece. One of the differences with this mold relative to one-part molds that I have been using, like this one here, is where we pour in the slip. With this one, I have a slip well that's designed into the mold itself. This is the area of the pot that sticks up above the rim of the pot. It gives us an extra volume of slip so that as the water is absorbed and the slip level drops, it always stays above the rim. The other advantage is that this shelf here, this gallery, winds up being a nice point where we can trim against to get a nice clean rim. This is harder to do with this vessel. There's not a similar slip well here. While we do have a reservoir, there's an extra bit of space above the rim. There isn't this shelf to trim against, and that's because this was designed as a two-part mold. This here is a 3D print that forms the inside of this piece. Basically, we pour the plaster around it like this, and then when it comes time to demolding, we need to be able to slide the print out, which means the top here is the narrowest piece, so that we can slide it out this way. In contrast, this mold here, the narrowest piece is at the bottom, and we slide it out that way. That means we can have the slip well built in. If we had a slip well on the top here, there would be no way to pull the plaster out. It would have an area that's narrower in the middle. I think we could attach the slip well. Either we would need a removable 3D printed piece, or more likely we just split the mold differently. In particular, if we split it vertically, split it like this, we could have all of this as one piece. The seam would be here, and then this could flare out just like we do on this mold. And then the plaster is pulling out sideways as opposed to up and down. However, that's a much more complicated change to shape cast, which I haven't gotten around to. So we wind up with two-part molds like this. And so what happens is when we pour the slip up, we wind up with some slip that winds up solidifying here. Basically, the slip and the plaster don't know where the pot starts and stops. Anywhere there's plaster, the slip will deposit and turn into a solid. So we have excess clay around the top here that needs to be trimmed off. So you can take a needle tool and go around, or take another trimming tool and cut around. Is there a way that we can prevent slip from depositing here? That's what I want to try in this video. In particular, I want to use this. This is pottery wax. It is meant to go on the bottom of your bisqueware to prevent the glaze from sticking. And it does that by adhering and basically making a waterproof layer so that the glaze isn't absorbed. Well, basically, I want the same thing. I want a waterproof layer here, just in this part of the mold, so that the water from the slip isn't absorbed. If that winds up working, it should make the trimming job much easier. Let's go ahead and try that. Basically, I want to go ahead and take this wax that I never use since I just wipe the bottoms of my pots and just apply a layer around here. This may be a little tricky to film because I basically need to get in here. I think the first thing I want to do is apply some tape so I don't get any wax where it shouldn't be. In particular, I don't want to get any wax on the surface of the mold where the pot's formed. So grab my painter's tape and I'm going to see if I can get a seam line down there to help protect things. All right, there we go. There's a layer of tape all the way around. So the mold actually has a little step in it. So this is the pot, and then there's this little step in before we get into the pour spout. And what I tried to do is basically tape, so I have that little edge right there, protecting that little step. I want that to cast into the pot so I have a nice clean place to trim against. And of course, this is a curved surface, so it's a little bit tricky to do. And I did it on the inside instead. So now I have my wax. When I used to use this on my pots, I'd actually dilute it down a little bit. I'd seen someone do that, but I think I'll use it straight up now. And I'll just take a brush. And apply it. Looks like I got some chunkies in my wax. Not surprising since I haven't used it in a year or two maybe. Guessing it doesn't go bad though. All right, there we go. I went all the way around. Go ahead and need to let the wax set up. It'll just take a few minutes. I didn't get any on the inside of the mold, so taping was a success. This is either now a wax brush or you need to go ahead and wash it out in hot water. So let me go ahead and give the wax a few minutes to set up. All right, so the wax is setting, but I think I have too much, so I'm going to go ahead and rub off any of the excess. Yeah, something like that. There's definitely still a wax layer there, but I don't have any of this that might get into my slip. All right, that looks a lot better. I don't know that you can tell on camera, but there's a little bit of a green tinge. So the wax definitely is still there, and I can feel it's smooth from the wax. Probably watering down the wax is a good idea. That way you don't waste so much, but no big deal. I'm guessing this may need to be reapplied occasionally. And you could potentially use other materials as well. I'd also thought about like petroleum jelly. Basically just want the plaster to stop absorbing the water. And I still don't have any wax on the inside of the mold, so it should be good. And be careful with your hands, making sure you don't get any excess anywhere else. So now I can go ahead and remove the protective tape. Comes out way easier than it goes in. And I've got a tiny bit that leaked under, so good thing I used the tape. So that's the mold prep work. I think for that we can go ahead and assemble the mold and slip cast a pot. So I've got some rubber bands just to hold it together so it doesn't move. Make sure that everything's aligned. Just do that by feel. If your hand's small enough, you can feel on the inside as well. My slip is all mixed up, so we'll go ahead and slip cast this like normal. So that's the vessel. Then we go up into the part that we waxed. Try and get it close to the top. Just like that. I'll go ahead and let this sit for 25 minutes, which will give me the thickness of the wall I want for my pots and my plaster and my slip. As the water is absorbed, the level of slip will drop according to the amount of water that is absorbed, but it will stay above that area where we waxed, thus protecting our rim. Let's drain the mold and get a first look at how our wax did. You can see how much the level has dropped. And we do have some clay here, but I think it's a lot less than we had before. There we are so far. All right, I'll give this about another 30 minutes to finish draining and for the clay to start to set before we demold. This here is where the slip has built up, and there still is some here, but I think it's less. Let me try a needle tool and remove this. All right, there's the piece removed. Definitely still have some buildup. I think what happens is the farther down it gets, the water can migrate actually through the deposited clay itself. So there's a rough trim, but we should be able to finish demolding now. All right, bottom came out first this time. It's loose, but I'm going to grab a wear board to set it on. Actually, yeah. There we go. So there is the rough trim straight out of the mold. And you can see where the step is in the mold itself. Put on my banding wheel. I'm going to trim at this point here. Square it lightly first. And cut all the way through. And we'll move that back to the wear board. So it's a little bit hard to show, but definitely the thickness of the pot was thicker than the piece that we trimmed off. So I think that probably did help. So I'll call that a qualified success. Definitely we had less slip buildup. Maybe I will try another coat of wax in the future, but either way, I think having less clay there is a win and helps with the cleanup. And then for the pot itself, this is still really soft, so I still need to seam it, but I want to go ahead and let it firm up for a while longer. Likewise, the rim itself needs a little bit more cleanup, but this is looking pretty good. One of the ideas I thought is printing an insert to go right here. So basically I would have plastic right there instead. I did that years ago with my sphere form. You can go back and see that video from a while ago. There I needed the extra volume because the opening was so small. This one is closer to the size of the pot itself. So the plaster is enough. So still a little bit more work than the one-part molds, but not too bad overall. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.